Hi, everybody. My name is Jhas Williams. I'm a news anchor at WBRC 6 News. I am joined right now by my friend, and he's a shrink too, but Dr. Josh Klapow, who is a clinical psychologist. I am so glad you're here because this is weird for me to be on this. Like, I don't even.
This is not what you do for a living every single day.
Right. Technically, because
it's you.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about, we're calling it your journey, but I think, obviously a lot of folks don't know what you want to be very honest with. And it's part of the reason I decided that, I would do this with you.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your mental health.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said it like that, my mental health, because I'm somebody who is always very vocal about the fact that I do have a mental illness. But I think a lot of people don't know what that looks like in a professional setting or even just as a person in general, but also as a news anchor. And I wanted to have this conversation because beyond Mental Health Awareness Month, I think it's important that people know that it impacts everybody. And I think when people think that or hear that, they think to themselves, oh, that's kind of vague. It doesn't really, but it does. It literally impacts everybody. And so my journey is a little bit unique.
Okay. Now remember, I'm a psychologist, so as far as unique goes, but let me hear it. It's unique to every.
Some things,
it's unique to every single person. So let's talk about it. Where did this start? When did it start? I always ask people, it doesn't matter when you got a diagnosis, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But when did you know that maybe you weren't feeling the way you should be?
Well, I knew at about 10 years old, believe it or not. I am 34 now. I'm always proud of my age, but that's a lot of years to be navigating what you don't even know is depression at the time. And I mean, I was 10 years old when I first remembered feeling this sadness that I couldn't really explain.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, growing up in a Christian household, at least my Christian household, the first instinct from my mom was always gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be expressing gratitude, and maybe that'll go away if you kind of be more grateful for what you have. And it not through any fault of her own, but this was just something that I think a lot of, in my experience, Christian families did. It was like, we'll pray about it.
Of course.
We'll take it to church. We'll talk to the Lord about it. But I found that it was something I couldn't shake. The depression, the sadness, and I'm 10, so I don't really have the language.
I was just going to say, and if you're a parent, they're not thinking that way, and they don't, and as a parent, they don't want to think that way. Okay.
Right. So fortunately, I mean, it wasn't until years later, but my pediatrician at the time was able to say something is not right here with the level of sadness. It took years for me to even get to the point where I was first clinically diagnosed depressed. I might have been about, maybe honestly, 17, maybe 16.
7 years.
Yeah, before I even got that kind of diagnosis. But then there was that stretch of time between the diagnosis and a suicide attempt that made me really, I mean, I tried to shake it. I kind of was like, I know what the doctor said, but I bet you I can outwork this. I bet you I can do my perfectionist thing. I can accomplish enough. I can be grateful enough. I can pray enough, and it'll dissipate on its own. And it didn't. I actually ended up having multiple suicide attempts. But by the time I was 23, I had probably my most significant one, which got me admitted to a psychiatric facility.
Okay.
So that's when I was diagnosed as bipolar.
Bipolar. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of folks. Sort of as you did the timeline of this, right?
Yeah.
So you, 10 years old, your pediatrician diagnoses you.
Yeah.
Did any sort of treatment, or
They did give me
like medication?
That's a really good question. They actually prescribed me antidepressants.
Okay.
But I struggled to take those.
Of course.
Because I kept feeling like I can do something different. I can outwork this. I can just power through. I mean, I just truly felt like I could do something different. More hobbies.
Yep.
Got more active. I got down to the skinniest I had ever been. I lost weight. I mean, I did everything I could to avoid having to be the person who takes antidepressants. I just felt like, what a loser am I?
And a lot of times people think, okay, depression, you must be in bed,
Yeah.
even as and you can't move and you can't do anything. But
Yeah.
you just, whatever you just described,
Yeah.
you clearly were able to both have depression and do things.
Yeah. And that was on most days. I mean, there were days, and still are, even now, days when I literally cannot get out of bed, or I may have to take a sick day because I'm just what I call it being sick. The same way that I don't fault anyone who might have a physical ailment. I have a mental ailment where my brain doesn't produce enough of what it needs. So there are days when I genuinely can't get out of bed. I struggle just to shower or just to brush my teeth or just to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. But at that time, when I first had that diagnosis, I felt like I can outwork this. So it wasn't so much that I couldn't get out of bed, even though that was a part of it. It was more so I'm not working hard enough.
Well, of course. So let me ask you this. Before the suicide attempt, because you talked about bipolar, you talked about depression, and you talked about a suicide attempt. And I think, in my experience, a lot of people who haven't been impacted by this directly, that's a lot of terms, and they have a hard time knowing what does that all mean.
Yeah.
So, help me understand a little bit about walking up to the suicide attempt. Actually, let me back up for a second, because you're talking about bipolar. Did you have highs and lows as a kid?
That's a really good question. I don't remember many highs, but I had so many lows.
Okay.
I didn't have a super, super turbulent home life. I did have a stepfather who was, at the time, very, very difficult to engage with. In fact, if I'm being honest, he was an abusive stepfather. So I did have some home components to that, but I would be lying if I said that was the main thing. I can't say that I had as many highs as I had lows. Like, the lows were something that really stick out because they were so prevalent.
Yeah.
So prevalent. I mean, I felt like, the way I've described it, even in my journals, felt like I was outrunning a monster.
Yes.
Every day it felt like I had to wake up and be like, hope I don't see that guy today. And by that guy, I meant the monster, right? Like the depression monster. I'm like, I hope I can outrun him today. And I would have successful days. But some days, I mean, like I said, it would be not being able to get out of bed, not being able to get out of my head, not being able to...
When you say get out and not get out of your head, like what? What kind of thoughts? And I don't mean necessarily thoughts of life not worth living, but just that when the monster was there.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I mean, it was just... At the time, are you referring to when I was younger or when I was...
Before now. Maybe in your teenage years, because that's a really rough period.
That was a rough period. Trying to outrun the monster and trying to get out of my head felt like a constant reminder that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worth anything, that I wasn't going to be successful, that I wasn't going to ever see this be any different. And it wasn't because I had this like insane home life. I mean, from the outside looking in, it just didn't.
Well, also I was going to ask you, did you do well in school? You had hobbies?
I did. I mean, there was a pivotal moment in my teen years that honestly was more difficult than prior to that. I had some issues where at the time I met my dad in my later years, my biological father, at around 17. So there were some things that I was just, that were just like...
That's more than things.
It was a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, there was a lot there. But I just felt like I can't ever be enough. I can't ever,
How much were people chalking it up to? Because this is one of the things I see a lot is, she's just an adolescent. She's a teen.
Right.
Teens, you have a lot of emotions, and it's all over the place. Did you get that a lot?
No, I don't think I did. In fact, I'm struggling to even remember what that was like. As long as I can remember, or as far back as I can remember, I feel like I've always had it somewhat together. So I don't know. I don't know what that was like. Like, I was not this like moody teen. I mean, obviously I was internally, but my mom and I were friends. We were close. You know what I mean? I didn't really want for anything.
Did she know as an adolescent that you were struggling with depression? I mean, because I know it with the pediatrician, but by the time...
I did tell my mom, but I don't think she had the knowledge then
Okay.
to be able to say, oh, this is something deeper. This isn't like a bad day. This isn't like she's sad. This is something that's her brain is not producing enough of, or a chemical imbalance. Like, I don't think she had the language, because I didn't have the language. So it wasn't like there was any real outward. I mean, as a kid, I remember feeling suicidal at the age of 10. Even then, 10 and 12 and 13,
Really?
I remember, feeling like, oh, thank God there's a way out. Like, I felt like suicide for me was like, oh, thank God. I don't know if I can handle this tomorrow. I don't know if I can handle this next week, but at least I have the trapdoor, or the option.
So it was a comfort.
For me, the idea of removing myself was a comfort.
Well, and that's pretty common.
Yeah.
That's pretty. Did you, even as a kid, did you have thoughts of how you were going to do that? Because I think that's important.
I did.
Okay, so
I did. Yeah, I did. I had thoughts. I had plans. I had letters written out. I had best friends that I would confide in and say, "Hey, could you take care of my mom?" I mean, I was a strategic girl. I've always been, kind of. It works against me and for me in some areas, but I've always been like, okay, if I'm going to get to this, then I need to map this out here. But what I couldn't strategize how to do was how to get out of that kind of sadness. It was so thick, and I'm still a believer now. I'm still a Christian now, but I couldn't. I would talk to the Lord about it all the time, and it just was something that I could not. No matter who told me, well, baby, you're just not praying about it, or you're just not. But I was, right. And it just wasn't going anywhere. So I don't think my mom even understood that, because I didn't understand that.
what happened when you said 23 was when you ended up in a psychiatric? Okay.
Yeah, a psychiatric facility. I was there at Christmas time for 2 weeks.
How'd you get there? Or what happened?
So I had, at the time, this is going to sound very trivial, but you know how there's a buildup of things, and when you already are dealing with feelings of something's wrong with me, something's not right with me, I'm worthless, maybe I'll never be different than what I'm experiencing. Again, it wasn't so much the outside circumstances, it was internally. There was so much turmoil, and it just felt like hell, really, internally. I think, if I can recall correctly, I had a huge blow up with a friend. And I always am hesitant to say that, because a lot of people are like, not, you had a friend, you guys fell out, and that's that's not what did it.
No, you should. Don't be hesitant to say that. That's exactly the whole. You've been saying this the entire time we've been talking. You've been talking about the internal being horrible, and you've said it about 5-6 times that the external
wasn't that
bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had a blow up with a friend.
I had a blow up with a friend, and it was probably the last straw of last straws for me.
Okay.
And I remember at the time, coincidentally, I had already been diagnosed with antidepressants. Or prescribed antidepressants. So I had them at my disposal. And I was taking them not really that regularly because, that's how that goes, right? At first, anyway, you're like, maybe I can do this on my own. I feel good today, so I'm not going
to... You feel good today, right.
So I'm not going to take it. That's right. So I don't live like that anymore. I take them every day. But I remember having them at my disposal, and I was like, this will do the trick. So that's what that was my method. I used or attempted
an overdose.
To overdose. Yeah.
Okay.
I think what happened was I called my dad to say goodbye, and I remember kind of going in and out, and my dad was blowing up the house phone. No one has that anymore, but at the time, my dad was blowing up the house phone. My little brother was downstairs watching TV. I had locked my door. Wait, no, I didn't lock my door. I don't remember if I locked it, but it was closed. And my brother was downstairs. I do remember that. I remember my dad blowing up the house phone. And I knew that later, too, because I heard the voicemails of him saying to my brother, Josh, please pick up the phone. Josh, please pick. Like, he was trying to get somebody's attention. I believe maybe he or somebody else called my mom. My mom, I remember her taking me to the hospital, and I remember them saying, hey, you can sign yourself in voluntarily or involuntarily. like they were trying to figure out whether or not they should pump my stomach. I just remember a lot of like commotion. I remember being asleep, being in an ambulance, waking up in a facility.
Okay.
And I looked crazy. Like my hair was, I mean, I know that's the least of my concerns, but I remember looking as crazy as I felt. And then now I'm like coming to, and I'm like, oh, and now I'm embarrassed because I look a mess. But I literally remember it was Christmas time, and I've always been a talker. I have always done the presentation thing. And I was like, I just know I can talk my way out of this. So I went to the doctor and I said, hey,
I'm fine.
There's been a misunderstanding. You got to let me go. And I know, and I mean, I put on my best show. And he was like, absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not. And so I was now there for 2 weeks at Christmas time. And I was so depressed because now I had to really come face to face with, okay, something is really wrong. It's now unavoidable. I have to really face this head on. And now I'm thinking through like my family. Now I have to look at this. Mm-hmm. There's nothing to do in that facility. They've taken away my belts. They've taken away my scarves. I don't have a door on the bathroom. I mean,
right.
So I have nothing to do but to sit and really think about some things. And I think the hardest thing for me then became shame.
Shame in what way?
I couldn't talk my way out of that one. I couldn't work my way out of that one. I couldn't figure that one out. I don't know when they're going to let me out. I don't know when they're going to let me sign myself out. I don't know what the heck has happened. And now I'm kind of embarrassed.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed because I could have just taken the medication in private and in quiet and no one had to know that. But now this is like unavoidable. Now people...
So think about that though for a minute. Because I think a lot of people... That doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You are embarrassed
because,
or you were, you were embarrassed because you weren't successful in overdosing, and now everybody knows.
Yeah.
Which, that's also a part of depression.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think this is something that's so important, that the shame depression cycle it goes and goes, and you're stuck in it.
Yeah.
Including embarrassment.
It just goes
and
goes and goes, and then one thing leads to another, and I just couldn't get out of that.
So how did you? Because at some point you got out.
At some point I did get out, but I'm stubborn. If I'm nothing, I am stubborn. So I got out of the facility.
Actually, let's say it different. Let me say it different, because people have a really bad conception about what psychiatric hospitals are.
True.
And I'm not saying it's fun.
Please, no, clear that up.
But well, you were there.
Yeah, I wasn't, but I call it the Grippy Sock Hotel. Because I still have my pair of Grippy socks. In fact, I've been hospitalized twice, and I still have the Grippy Sock souvenir. This is not funny. I'm not making a joke. Just know that
of course,
there's a community of people who have survived this. A little dark humor. We do call it the Grippy Sock Hotel. What do you call it? What would you call it?
They're grippy socks, so you don't have shoes on and you don't slip. But okay. So you were discharged, but I think maybe talk to us quickly about what happened while you were there.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people just think, they just like lock you in there and then you just wait for some amount of time and then you go out.
This is the hardest part to talk about, only because it was one of the most eye-opening. I did my best writing there. Mm-hmm. This is like going to sound like I'm romanticizing the Grippy Sock Hotel, and I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to be really clear about that. This is where people go to get help, but you also meet a lot of characters there.
Sure.
People that you would not think would be there, mainly because I've met top professionals.
Yes.
I met top professionals. I met Army sergeants who I'm still in friendships with to this day, who suffered from PTSD from things they experienced, or I've met men who were unhoused and they dealt with schizophrenia. I met a school teacher who had smoked marijuana and it was laced, so it did something to her mentally. So I thought I was going to this place that was like people were in chains and we were all getting lobotomies. No, like honestly, I walked away with some of the funniest, most charismatic. I remember a guy named Michael trying to hit on me, but he was schizophrenic, so he was both, you know,
Yep.
he was having a conversation with himself to
Yep.
me, you know, but we just, I don't know, I know that sounds like I'm trying to make light of it, but it's just, you meet people from all walks of life.
Right.
And you're like, oh, this is not, you know, people are just people.
Well, you're in a
Like,
hospital.
Yeah.
Just like
Any other hospital.
But what happened that got you to the point where they were able to feel that you were safe so that you could leave?
I had to have a support system come and vouch for me.
Okay.
I had to have family members physically come and say, we are going to be her support system when she leaves. And even then, I still had to do outpatient care, which taught me or gave me tools on how to kind of navigate even after I left the facility. And even then, when I was sitting in outpatient, I remember thinking, I'm still not going to take those meds.
Why?
I didn't want to lose. I didn't want to lose. I did not want this thing to beat me and force me into, like, you need to take your meds. I was like, I'm going to still beat it without that.
Okay.
So that was stay number one. Because, yeah.
So what happened? So how old are you now? You're 23.
I'm 34.
No, I mean at the point you're
time.
23, and then what? When did you start your career?
Oh, that's a good question. That's another conversation. But I will tell you that because I've always been somewhat of a performer, somewhat of a speaker, a public speaker, like this is what I've always done, I kind of was able to navigate that and use some of the tools of the things I was feeling internally, you know, and struggling through. But it just got to a point eventually where I had to say to myself, I know you feel good today, and maybe you'll feel good tomorrow, but you need to stay on those meds.
Okay, so you stay on the meds.
Yeah, so 23 was like a really bad breakdown. I think I had another one by about 27, maybe. And I still struggle. I still struggle with taking my medication. I still struggle with being consistent. I still struggle with not feeling that shame because I have to take it. I still struggle with, I mean, every time I get off of the first alert desk, people can't hear this, but I'm literally like, you're not going to talk mean to yourself. You're not going to, like, I have to work through a barrage of things that kind of help me keep myself in check and balance. If that makes sense.
You talked about bipolar, and I think, you know, people kind of know depression, but I know we talked, I can't remember the term you used, I can't remember when you go to Walmart, the unnecessariness.
Oh, God, yeah, the mania.
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to?
Talk about that a little bit, because I think when you and I were talking, I was asking you questions, you know, do you feel high and euphoric? Because like a lot of people, that's the thing, oh, you're bipolar, you know, you've got these high, you know, you feel wonderful, and you were telling me, that's not exactly how it's
So no, but that's only because for me, I have the one that, I can't remember, is it bipolar 2 or bipolar?
You've got what's called
hypomania.
Hypomania. And hypo doesn't mean more, it means less.
Okay, so that's it. So because I can never remember which one.
I can't either sometimes.
Yeah, so, so I tend to lean more toward the depressive side, where I battle with depression regularly. But the mania side, not as much. However, I do know I'm manic when it's like midnight and I'm at Walmart throwing everything in the cart. I got up at 3. Like, I have to be to work at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why am I at midnight, or why am I at Walmart at midnight throwing stuff in the cart? And I'm not going to buy it. Like, I'm like, oh, and I could use this, and I could use this, and I could do this. Or I'm up writing a 100,000, 1,500 page manuscript at like 11 p.m. Like, girl, go to bed.
But you know, okay, so people
those are the signs.
Well, yeah, so those are signs and symptoms, right?
Yeah.
But people are like, well, why are you doing that?
I'm not sure. I think for me, you tell me, why am I doing that actually?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is the part that's so important, and you talked about it a little bit before, is your brain is working differently.
Yeah.
Because you just said, you know when you're at Walmart.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about that. Like this difference between, because I think people think you're crazy.
Yeah.
And so you what we call lose touch with reality.
Sure, sure.
Maybe like the person you met who had schizophrenia.
Sure.
But that's not what's happening for you.
No.
So tell me a little bit, because I think it's interesting.
Sure.
The Walmart part.
Yeah.
What's happening? What's happening in your brain between I shouldn't be doing this, or it's silly.
What's happening at that time? If I'm doing something like that, something has told me, you can get all of this done right now. Mm-hmm. All of this can be done right now. All the shopping, all the food shopping, all the whatever you like, just get it done, and we'll get it done in bulk, and we'll be successful at doing all of it at one time. That's not really overly realistic. So even though I'm not feeling euphoric to the point where I could like fly, which is one of the symptoms, when you feel euphoric or whatever, you're like, oh, I can jump off a building. I don't feel that to that extreme, but I do have this all of a sudden kicking myself, where I'm like, I can write that book tonight. I can bathe both dogs right now within the hour, run them back home, come back to like all of a sudden my brain goes, I can do all of it.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, so let's not do that.
Right. We call it grandiose thinking,
right.
or your brain is moving super fast.
Right. I'm on one end of the spectrum or the other, which is like I'm completely down in the dumps, or I can do all the things. Bipolar. Two poles.
So here's something I think, before I met you, obviously I didn't know. And I think this part's important too. Yeah. If I told you I don't have heart disease, but if I told you I had heart disease, you didn't know that I had heart disease before I had heart disease. Yeah. And I function, and I think this is one of those things where people watch you on TV. Yeah. And you're sitting here talking about coming off the first alert desk. Yeah. And when they see you, you're fine. Yeah. So maybe talk a little bit about what it's like at work. And
that is a really good question. I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, one of the biggest misconceptions is that if you have a mental illness, you're all of a sudden rendered incapable of keeping a job, or keeping a full-time job, or keeping steady work, or whatever the case may be. Like, you're all of a sudden rendered kind of like, let's put her to the side. She can't really, or he can't really do that. And that is not true at all. I will show up. I don't, call out. I'm not unreliable. That is not what that looks like for everyone. I can't speak for everyone, but that's not what that looks like. At least that's not what that looks like for me. What that looks like for me, what bipolar disorder looks like for me in my line of work is I had to leave work a little bit early today because I could not outrun the sadness. I call it like the saddies. It's kind of like if you come under the weather, I can feel it coming. I mean, just like I can feel when I'm starting to get manic, it comes in like waves. Like it'll be like 3 days of something's weird. And believe it or not, I personally experience physical symptoms as well.
Okay, so that's a really important one. Yeah. I mean, it's not, when you say you feel it coming, do you feel like less energy, lethargic, slower, kind of caved in, or what does it feel like physically for you?
I'll tell you what it feels like, and I'll tell you what it looks like to people who work with me. Okay. Perhaps. I feel internally not myself. Okay. I feel a lot lower. I feel a lot more like I'm self-aware, self-conscious. I'm a lot more insecure. I'm a lot more edgy. My mom calls it edgy. When I get edgy, when I get angry or easily irritated. And so internally what's happening is this war. I'm like, I know everybody hates me. I just know they do. Because internally, I'm dealing with self-loathing, and I'm dealing with the shame of all the things I just described, which is just turning into this big ball. It's like feeding onto itself, right? And now it's turning into depression, and now it's internally, that's what's happening. It's like this war that just keeps or this storm that's it keeps building. But on the outside,
what?
It looks like, and good morning at the first alert desk. We're going to just make sure that, you really wouldn't know.
So are you faking it, or are you able to Because I think this is important. I think it's important.
Yeah.
You tell me.
Yeah.
Are you faking it, or are you pushing through so you can do your job?
I'm pushing through so I can do my job. However, and I said this on TikTok, I am always appreciative when people say to me, you articulate so well, or I like what you do, or I like how you do it, I like how you speak. Whatever the compliment is, I'm always so grateful because it means I'm doing my job well. But it makes me feel like an absolute liar. It makes me feel like a liar because...
Because why?
Because I don't feel like I'm being honest. I'm dying inside, but I'm doing my job.
Yep.
I'm showing up, I'm doing my job, and you would never know. Even when I see you, if I see you in the store, it's like, oh, hi, like, I'll do the thing. But internally, sometimes that looks like, I couldn't brush my teeth this morning, so I hope you don't get too close, because, you might smell my breath. I couldn't get in the shower this morning, so I hope you back up.
So people, like, let's go on that one. Like,
Yeah.
people are going to go, what? What do you mean you can't brush your teeth and you couldn't get in the shower?
Sure.
Why? How? What's it like?
I mean, when you don't want to get out of bed, and you can't stop, doom scrolling, I call that doom scrolling, when you can't, when you're not all the parts are not there, you don't really want to do too much of anything. I've seen it called this way on TikTok, and I agree. It's called, like, depression house. When your house is just like, just looks like it's exploded, and you're like, who cares? Like, it's one of those things. It's a struggle. Like, it's an actual struggle. And I feel like my fear is that people will see this and say, some of these things she's describing are very trivial. But my hope is that some people will say, oh, it can look one way and it can be another way as well, so it doesn't all look the same.
What do you mean trivial?
There are lots of people who either maybe can't keep a clean house for whatever reason, or had a fallout with a friend, or struggle with insecurity. It doesn't arbitrarily mean, or doesn't necessarily mean, that you have depression.
That's true.
Doesn't necessarily mean you have a mental illness. It could just mean that you are, in fact, insecure, or can't keep a clean house, or are disorganized. I am those things as well, just in and of themselves.
That's really important. So if I see you on a great day,
Yeah.
your house is going to be a little...
Sometimes. It depends on it depends on how you catch me. Sometimes, sometimes. But I do happen to have bipolar disorder. I do happen to have depression. And so my sadness, what happens up here is not just your average, oh, I had a bad day. Oh, I was disorganized. It's like, for me, why am I even alive? We should wrap this up. Like, I shouldn't even be here anymore. Like, it turns into something so dark and such a pit that is so hard to get out of. And will I do it? Yes. Monday morning I will show up, but as soon as,
Yeah, so what's it, so talk folks through. You, by the nature of your job, have to not look depressed.
Yeah.
Okay. But I want to understand, you and you don't come to WBRC for first alert for whatever 30 seconds and then go home.
Right.
Right. But people only see you for a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's just talk just a little bit about what is it like to be at the workplace, because your job involves more than turning to a camera and talking.
Yeah.
And so what is it like to be at the workplace when you're not feeling good and stable? What's happening over the course of the day? That starts at what time? 2 a.m.?
3 for me. Yeah. But
Can I say this? I want to say that's crazy.
It is.
That's crazy. I know that's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah,
okay.
That is
okay.
crazy.
So what is it like over the course of the day? Because I think a lot of people are. Well, I go to work. I work for 8 hours, and I understand what she's saying, but she's on TV, and So what's the workday like?
So what is my workday like in general?
Well, in general, with thoughts of everybody hates me, and because you're there all day.
Trying to keep your head down, trying to disappear. That doesn't always work for me because I do like a good joke. So even that sometimes is masking. Even that sometimes me cracking jokes. And this is why when people are like, there were no signs of this person seeming like they were going to take their own life. There were no signs of this person looking depressed. Well, of course not. Of course not. I mean, are they going to, when you come up to people and you say, hey, I'm depressed and I'm thinking about taking my own life, you run the risk of, or at least I've felt like I've run the risk of being a nuisance. Not because people didn't love me or people didn't care, but it's such a risk to say that to somebody, because you also run the risk of looking like somebody who's kind of dramatic, kind of a bother. I feel like, unfortunately, our culture and society has just kind of developed this thing where we don't really appreciate suicide until someone has already taken their own life. When they are talking about it, it's kind of, there's only so much that other people can kind of take of that. So a regular day for me, and this is, and not just, and I don't mean at WBRC, but I just mean in general, even in my career as a news anchor, or even just as a media professional, because before news I was in radio, and I wrote for print, I freelance wrote. Even then, it still looked like me cracking jokes. It still looked like me being the funny one in the room. It still looked like me talking about my dogs. It still looked like me buying a new dress. It still looked like all of those things. And every time I would think to myself, I wonder what they would say if they knew that I'm not planning to be here tomorrow at all. I'm not planning to be alive tomorrow.
I think, yeah. And you can't get out of bed. Well, you got out of bed, but you don't want to get out of bed.
Yeah, I'll get right back in. As soon as I'm done the shift, right back in I go.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that you can't see that unless they live with you.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. We didn't talk about this, but what's it like for your husband?
Oh my God, wow.
Because there are a lot of people who either have kids or loved ones who manage this and the impact. But what's the impact like for him, to the extent that you feel comfortable?
I am so blessed and so fortunate that I married probably the world's most easygoing man. I married a Canadian, so, they're very chill. Unless I'm making jokes about his bacon and moose meat sandwiches, that doesn't really exist. But unless I'm like teasing, even then, like I'm still a jokester. But I married a very easygoing man, and I'm so blessed for that, because he's such a support system. He's such a support system. But here's the reality: he doesn't always know what to say. He doesn't always know what to say. He doesn't always know what to do. When we got married, true story, the morning we woke up after our wedding, I had a panic attack because I thought, what did I just do? I just got married. Like, that was crazy to me. I couldn't believe I did something so permanent. And then I had to kind of filter it through and say, was this a bipolar thing? Did I do this out of mania?
Yeah.
I love my husband, so we're not going to do that. But I had to think through those things. And I had a complete panic attack. And I called my pastor, who did premarital counseling for us. And he was like, honestly, he said, that's okay. He said, my wife had a panic attack when she had to change her last name. This is a life change. So that does happen. But my husband didn't, he was like, are you good? Like, what? What did I do? Like, he was like, is everything okay? Like,
did he know before you all got married?
Absolutely.
Okay,
that was something we talked about. That was very important to talk about, because for me, that is such a big part of who I am, what I struggle with, what I deal with. And some of that has also been, fortunately, I have such a great mom who's been able to say to him, hey, just so you know, sometimes your wife needs a little extra that, or sometimes your wife might need a little extra this and that and the other. So I have a support system, but it doesn't mean that because you have a support system that everything is easy, and it definitely doesn't mean that that they are always going to get it. That can be lonely sometimes.
I was going to ask you, what do you say to him when or what does he say to you when you're really depressed, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's worried about you? Or what do you say to him?
Fortunately, because of the amount of time I've had now to work through this, I'm able to articulate better what I need. But that's a process. And I really do feel and empathize with anyone who is in the beginning of their process, because you have to learn how to do that. Even if it's just learning how to say, I'm not myself today, and I don't feel good, and I don't know why, but I could use a little space and it's not you. Or I could use a little space, something you said triggered something for me. And I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure what it is yet, but let me unpack it a little bit. I mean, that takes real work. So when it's really bad, I would say, like, when it's, I can't even get out of bed, sometimes it's nice that he will and my mom is good at this too. My mom will just get me out into the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and that doesn't fix everything, but that helps. That's a good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm not even clean. I'm out there stinky.
Mm-hmm.
But that sun hitting my face made me say, okay, maybe I can make it to the shower. And that's hard. I mean, I have seen my people struggle when it comes to trying to love me through this.
Right.
You know, my community has had to really work at this.
Right.
But so have I, so it's an effort.
So let's talk about, you know, you talk about medication, you talk about your pastor, you talk about your husband, you talk about your mom.
Yeah. What do my dogs do for me?
No, but I can ask a good one. Yeah,
no,
what do
it's
your
fine.
dogs do?
Nothing.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. They just love, but they love you.
Yeah, and run me dry for money,
That's
treats.
right.
You
Of
know.
course, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are people always want to know, okay, what is treatment like? So you know that, oh, she must be on pills. Well, you've been talking about it. So
Yeah.
you're on antidepressants, okay, and if she takes her pills, then you know there's a chemical imbalance, and if she takes pills, then she'll be fine. Which is actually kind of ironic because I know a lot of people who won't take the pills.
Right.
They don't want to take the pills,
Yeah.
but they also believe that if they take the pills, there's some people who take the pills and they'll be fine. There's others who take the pills and they say it's going to be weak.
Right.
But what is it like for you to manage this health condition?
In my toolkit, like you said, I have my husband, I have my mom, I have my pastor. When you're dealing with mental illness or mental health, you need a toolkit that comes with a lot of different parts. Medication is another one of those. But also, therapy is another one of those. My therapist, my talk therapist is, you know, that's crucial for me. Having a psychiatrist who can prescribe the medication is crucial for me. So those are things that I need to always have at all times. That's a part of, like, if I had to put it in a bag, I've got my husband, my mom, you know, my people, my brother, you know, friends and stuff like that. But I also have my therapist. I also have my psychiatrist. And the reason I really want to drive that home is because a lot of people believe that they can outrun or ignore therapy. And I'm not trying to push therapy. I'm just trying to say it's so important that we as a community and as a society don't underestimate the power of therapy and talk therapy, because what ends up happening is people say to themselves, oh, I don't need that, I can just go for a run. You still need to unpack those things with someone. And if you don't need to make other people feel uncomfortable, because therapy is a luxury. It's not afforded to everybody, and the people who can afford to have it and utilize it, you don't want to discourage them from taking advantage of their resources. Therapy is a phenomenal resource.
So let me say this, though. Because you made a really important point. You said therapy is a luxury.
Yeah.
And we're friends.
Yeah.
And you're not my client.
Right.
So I'm going to push back on you.
Okay, hit it.
It's a necessity.
Yeah.
It's a necessity that not enough people get. But the reason I'm saying that is, as you've been talking throughout this whole time, you know, you've been talking about different parts where you're more depressed, less depressed, all that kind of stuff. But you've been talking about internal thoughts around, I'm no good, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, shame, all these sorts of things. And, you know, one of the things in therapy, as I'm assuming that you get, is learning how to change the way you think and see the world.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I would agree with you there. Totally. And I think that's what also is why I don't like when people kind of talk down on therapy, because it changes not only the way you see the world, like you said, but also your world. Because to have somebody to bounce these ideas off of, it's not just, you know, somebody sitting there with a pen and pad and like, oh, that's not true, you're not no good. Like, no, it's
right.
It's somebody who's able to say, well, tell me why you think that.
Yes.
And so then if you're able to kind of say, well, because of X, Y, Z, and then they're able to say, well, did you ever look at it from this angle?
Yep.
You know, and then it's like, oh, not really. And it's not even always that simple. Sometimes it's just the fact that you're building a relationship with this person that continues on. This therapy relationship is one that's ongoing, and you start to get comfortable with them to kind of work through something. Sometimes you just need to massage out certain kinks mentally, and you can't do that alone. And people don't have a problem when it comes to having a teammate In a sports setting, people don't have a problem when it comes to having a partner in life or when it comes to having friendships. You sometimes need that partnership with someone else to help you work through some other things.
So quickly too, because I think this is the other one. The people say, well, you got friends, you got your husband who you say is supportive. Why not talk to them?
Because you don't want to weigh on those people either.
Okay.
That's not fair. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair to dump on people. They're not trained professionals. Yes, you can use them in your toolkit, but it's important to have people who are trained professionals who do this for a living, have studied this, and are able to say, and you can really specialize it the way you need to. If you need a black female therapist,
That's
if you need a Christian white male therapist, whatever you need, there's a specialty for that.
Yeah, we come in every color, flavor,
the whole 9 yards. So if that's what you feel most comfortable with, I know some men are only comfortable talking to female therapists, while some women are only comfortable talking to male therapists, or whatever. Utilize that. Your friends can't do that.
Okay, and then this other thing I wanted to make sure we got in.
Yeah.
Super easy, right? Super easy to get therapy, super easy to find a psychologist. It's just, you just 1-800, get a therapist. What's it been like? Because you've lived all over the place, so you've got to do this multiple times.
I have. Birmingham is my 9th city, and I'll tell you, it's a heartbreak every single time I have to move, because it means I have to break that relationship, and sometimes breaking that relationship with a therapist sends me into depression. So I did just move to Birmingham about 6-7 months ago, and I'm still trying to find a therapist. But some of that looks like being honest about that too. I have said now to you, I have said to, we had a mental health professional on the show yesterday, and I said to her, hey, if you hear of any good therapists, I am really trying to find one that works in network with my health insurance. And she sent me a list. You've sent me a list. So some of that comes from being honest about that. There are free counseling resources. There are a whole bunch of things that some people wouldn't know if they are not opening their mouths. Right. And that's not a knock. It's just that it's hard to get help for what you're not saying you need help with.
That's right.
So it is hard, but it's not impossible.
Right. And if you had a heart condition,
you would absolutely get help.
Because I don't want you to die from a heart attack.
No.
And you've already talked about us, this whole thing, 3, 4, 5, 10 different times where you almost ended up not being here.
Right. Right.
Hey, I appreciate you sharing this with me, because I'm not your therapist.
Right.
But
you're my friend.
You are.
Thank you, Dr. Josh. I really appreciate you taking this time. And honestly, I appreciate how comfortable you made me feel.
Thank you. Listen, you and I had a lot of conversations about resources. And those resources are not unique to you. The link is in the description of all kinds of resources. And what you said was true, which is money is not the barrier to those resources. So if you want more information, just look in the description, and there's plenty there for you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jhas.
And thank you for watching.
For more information on Mental Health Awareness Month, visit WBRC.com/community.